only go for a startup, it also goes for when you have gone into the market and you're looking at your roadmap, you're looking at what features are you prioritizing. If you dumb it down to 3 simple questions, ask anybody who has a great idea to answer these 3 questions. What is the problem? How are you solving it? And most importantly, who are you solving it for? If there is a big amorphous issue out there, we have seen a lot in healthcare recently. Hey, we should have centralized electronic medical records. Okay, I think we all agree, we see the problem. We know who we're solving for the consumer, or how we're solving it, but who are we solving it for? Right now, nobody wants to buy that product. So it seems like a really good common good problem, but nobody wants to solve it. So if you don't know who you're solving it for, we have a challenge. One thing of maybe trying to articulate that, and I really like this idea, is the single sentence problem. Trying to tell me in one sentence, what is the problem you're solving? And I know that's not necessarily the market favorite, it's getting back in favor, but you think about Uber, why can't they just push a button to get a ride? I think that's a great question. And if you can start with that as your question, you have something simple to go by. It doesn't mean the solution is going to be simple, but it means that you have clearly articulated the issue. Also really like when we partners, why would glasses cost as much as an iPhone? It's a really good question. And if you ask that question as your starting point, you have, I'd say, a much better shot at actually figuring out what you're going to do and for who. One of the things, and we hear this a lot, when people talk about, hey, I have a great idea, I'm going to build this thingy here, or I'm going to provide this service. And as you ask, so who are you building for? Which vertical are you going for? And Hank spoke about before, understand market size. And we spoke about earlier this morning, understand the potential market size, figure out where you're going to go. And when you do that, it's very tempting to say, well, I can do everything. If I can do finance, I can do healthcare, I can do insurance, I can do et cetera. My experience, and I'm sure some people disagree with us, is that when you are in the early stages of a company, this idea that you're multi-vertical is a fallacy. I think generally, in most, at least in my experience, in most examples, it is a reflection of people not understanding the industry they're going into. So I think as you go to market, as you're building your solution, as you're building your proposition, pick an industry. Once you have picked that industry and once you have shown you can be successful in that industry, because the moment, if you want to sell to a bank, you better speak bank. You better understand what people mean when they talk about operating efficiency. You have to know what does net interest income mean, what does attracting deposit mean, dormant consumers, cost of serving customers. You better speak the language. If you don't speak the language, you're not ready to go into that industry, into that vertical in my experience. Once you have shown you can be successful in one vertical, maybe the market is big enough that you should just continue to sell into that vertical. Or you can say, well, I've shown I can be successful. Now I'm going to take my platform, my product, and I'm going to adapt it to the next vertical. So I know not all people agree with this one here, but I've just never seen it done well out of the box. So how about the anatomy? You have answered the question of what is the problem we're solving, how are we solving it, who are we solving it for. Now let's look a little bit at the anatomy of your product. So there are basically 2 different ways of going to market fundamentally. And then there's all the hybrids in between. But there is the top-down, where you walk in and you sit down and spend an extended period of time with senior management, CEO if you can, but C-suite level, and they buy into your vision, into what it can do for a business. And they essentially said, yes, the buying decision is coming from an executive, a sponsor, and they're going to push this through the organization. The other way is bottom-up. For me, bottom-up 5 years ago, a good example would be Slack. Slack started in my organization at that point by having our tech people start using Slack. It was cheap to onboard. We had a handful of engineers. There's no corporate mandates. There's no kind of deliberate strategy that Slack is going to be what we use. But people started using it. It got broader and broader, and eventually the essentially grew from the bottom up into the organization to become a corporate mandate. So how do you decide what your product should be? Is it top down? Is it bottom up? And I just wanted to, go-to-market is generally seen as a science. It's a bit of a black art, and some people do it really, really well. I wanted to try to introduce a little bit of structure, and I'm not saying that this is the only way of doing it, but I think going through this exercise is a really, really good idea, or a really good way of cementing how you think about your product. So asking yourself, I have 2 slides here, 10 simple questions. So, how easy is your product to use? Is it easy? Is it simple? If it's Slack, it's very easy. I start typing and look, I'm writing messages. I heard somebody talk about before underwriting, automating underwriting decisions in the banking world. That's complex. So that's not easy to sell. Ease of deployment. Do I do like Stripe? When Stripe went live, you could go to the website, you enter your credit card, and now you're accepting payments. Or is it a heavy deployment where you have to put in an appliance or big infrastructure within insurance companies' data center? Who's going to buy it? So is it the person that's going to use it that's going to buy it? Or is it the person that runs a team of 10,000 people that are going to buy it? Cost. Cost is a big factor. Is it going to cost you? One of the things that a lot of Slack businesses, G Suite, has gone through the door is G Suite $5 a user a month. Guess what? I can take a flyer on this one here. I'm just going to sign 10 people up, and if I waste $50 a month, you'll be all right. Now, if I install a complete Outlook infrastructure in my company, that's a lot more expensive, and of course it requires a little more thought. And then it's taken from validation. How long time is it going to take before we start implementing something so we actually can see whether it works? Stripe, you will know the same day. Simple APIs, you build them into your app, you're up and running. Certain other things like, again, loan underwriting, that's complex. And that's going to take a while before you understand. Offering, what is the product offering? Is it a freemium? Sign up as a freemium, or is it an enterprise software? Who's your market you're going after? We should have answered that in section 1. So are you a B2C business, are you a B2B business? I think very important, who's your ideal customer? Are you trying to sell this to an individual contributor? So for example, Slack. If I'm a developer, having Slack is just awesome, to be honest. It's a brilliant tool. If I'm the manager of 8,000 developers, I'm not quite sure if Slack is that awesome. I have to think more about it. So be very, very clear on who you're selling to. What is the sales process? Is it transactional? Again, I'm going to pick on Stripe because I love Stripe. I think I came out of the payments industry, so I think Stripe was awesome. You could go in. The sales process was 5 minutes end-to-end. It involved me putting in my credit card and I was up and running. Now, I've also sold mobile banking payment solutions to very large banks. So, for example, standing up a mobile application solution for someone like Bank of America, that's a 12-month project. So, sales process is going to go according to this. And then finally, who is going to be required to make a purchase? And I think that's very, very important when we look at how we go to market. It's just kind of, sorry. I'm not sure how to open the way. Anyway, I make that the quiz instead then. We have 10 different questions here. If you're sitting on the left-hand side here, simple task, individual contributors that are set up, this is a simple process. A simple process means that you like to be successful, or you may be successful with a bottom-up approach. If you're sitting on the right-hand side here, you're complex, and your chances of being successful rely on your ability to go through a top-down sales process. If you sit in the middle, you have to figure out where are you more likely to be. So I'll look at, are there any, even if the average lands somewhere here, look at, are there any very important outliers that you want to focus on? That's also the value proposition, the value, the ROI, the potential value you can bring to a business. Does that determine whether it's simple or if it's complex? I would say, firstly, if you're bringing a tremendous value to a business and you're not a high-cost item, you're leaving money on the table. So I would say they should, the idea of bottom-up pricing is not optimal. So if you understand what value you're bringing, You should price yourself accordingly. And that means if you're bringing tremendous value, you're going to be expensive. And that kind of moves you into a more complex sales cycle. Does that make sense? Now, what does that mean? So if you're determined that you're a top-down organization, the colors are not great here, I apologize for that, guys. I'll fix that if you circulate the slides. But where should you start? So if you want to build out an organization, there's one answer. You can get 500 million from SoftBank, but most of us don't get 500 million from SoftBank. We need to pick 10 people to start the organization, and where should we focus? If you are top down, I'd say where you really want to start in the sales process, go to market, is account executives. So at that point, I don't look at inside sales, don't look very much as SDRs, massive pipeline development. You want a couple of execs that identify 5, 10, 20 potential candidates, start walking the corridors, understanding what does this organization look like, who is my ultimate decision maker, who's above her, who's below her, who do I know, how do I get to them. So you need account execs, you need sales engineers, because what you have is complex, and you need somebody who can bridge that gap between hardcore developers and salespeople that go, well, this is just an API, and API if anything. You need somebody to talk to the technical people on the other side. And you need professional services, because it is complex, you probably need to implement it. Marketing comes, you always need, but think about who you are communicating to. If you have a top-down product, an expensive product, getting great awareness on Facebook, on Twitter, etc., may not necessarily drive the adoption or viral adoption that you're hoping to get. Once you're beyond kind of the initial sale, you want to start focusing on getting customer support and account management in place, because accounts are hard to come by. The cost of customer acquisition is very, very high. You don't want to lose them. So you want to keep them happy, and you want to make sure that you don't upset them by having your service falling over. Only if you start getting really mature would I start focusing on getting business development reps and people cold calling, when you essentially have to go from, you have hit that 25, 50, 100 customers, and now you think about how do I get to 1,000 customers. Yeah?
So I'm wondering, for a top-down organization that's really stable, doesn't have a lot of top-down organization that doesn't have a lot of funds to support marketing and communications, what would be your advice to a complex company that needs to be simple?
No, that's a great question. I would look at who do I hire first. So I'll get to that a little bit later, but who do you hire first? I think about very early in the process, you better find a salesperson. And at that point, you're looking for effectively a director at sales level, somebody who has a Rolodex, somebody who is so into the kind of organization you're going after. In my current example, that's mid-sized community banks. So I need somebody who has sold relatively new technology into a bank with anywhere from 500 billion to 10 billion in assets, has a Rolodex, and know how to work the corridors in there. That doesn't mean that the person is necessarily more expensive, but if you think about what is the pedigree of that person, so I'm not going to need somebody who sold 10,000 customers on a Stripe solution, for example. I'm going to need somebody who's more used to the complex sales cycle, and you put a comp structure in place. At this point, equity is good, but salespeople, and most of us, as one of my good friends like to say, salespeople are coin operated, so figure it out. Your first 5 or 10 sales are the most important ones. Put an outrageous commission in place, 10% of total contract value.
Can I follow up with that question?
Yeah, please.
So if you don't have enough, can you start them as a freelancer, just to start off, and then once they get...
Let's say the commission is a lot larger than you normally would if he was on board, he or she was on board.
Yeah.
But if you start off as a freelancer with a higher commission saying that we're able to make this work, then we can bring you on board and we adjust it. Because at the beginning you don't have all that money.
No, exactly. And I think that's a great, you're hitting spot on the right channels. How do you bring, when you don't have a lot of cash, how do you bring a good salesperson on board? And what I've seen before is many of the salespeople I work with have experience. Even if you have a fantastic proposition, they're going to be uncertain about whether this is going to resonate with the market. You may not even have a customer yet. So what we have done in the past is, hey, why don't we do an informal engagement? I'll give you all the assets you need. So I'll train you on the positioning in the pitch. I'll give you the deck, the intro email, etc., etc. We'll agree on 5 or 10 potential customers you go after. You don't work for me yet. You keep your daytime job now, but anything you land, we spoke about integrity before. Anything you land, you will get paid for. So even if you don't work for me today, but you get us collectively into company ABC, if they turn into a deal, you will retrospectively get paid on it. I think what we have found was I have found was it works really well in giving the salesperson an opportunity to evaluate the proposition. It may resonate with the salesperson, but maybe it doesn't resonate with the potential customers. Yeah?
Follow up on that. What kind of commission do you have to pay?
It depends a lot on what you're doing. So, getting a 5-6% commission on a $500 deal, nobody really cares. So where I pay most is on the complex sides. So we have relatively big deals, anywhere from $500,000 a year to $3-4 million a year. What we normally structure is every salesperson will have a target. And we'll say for the first year we run heavy commissions, so we'll run 5-6% commission. Generally that is on first year contract value, not total contract value. So you need to manage this idea to not encourage people to sell 1-year deals when you really want to sell 3-year deals. So the dictum becomes to sell 3-year deals. But I'd say at steady state, I'd say for larger contract around 3% or something like that. But the first year, if you don't get the first 5 or 10 sales, it doesn't matter, so you might as well go really rich at that point. Now, if you're a bottom-up organization, you need to take a different orientation. You really need to start with demand generation and BDRs. The name of the game in bottom-up organization is how do you get to 5, 10, 50,000 potential leads. You get them in the funnel, it's largely self-service, and you don't have the time or money to have somebody spend 1 day a week for 3 months to onboard somebody who's going to pay you $200 a month. So this is about getting cheap resources. Right now, you can get independent BDRs that will do phone calls 40 hours a week, 22 days a month, from 2,000 onwards. And that's what you're looking for at that point. Once you have that, you go really, really heavy marketing comms, demand generation, and then customer support. Again, even though they're not expensive to capture, customer support is what's going to drive people away. We have all heard the horror stories from people in the payment industry for Square. What really, really hurt Square was that the customer support was just not very good. If you had a problem, it was tough luck. And you have 2 point-of-sale terminals and you're not really creating revenue for me, so that's not going to be a lot of support. Only as you really start maturing, get into that phase 3, that's when you start thinking about, okay, how do I take my bottom-up approach? I've proven myself, I have 500, 1,000, 2,000 customers. I now actually have the potential to start going to big markets. So think about G Suite winning PwC globally except Germany. That's an example of something that in many ways started out at the bottom up, feeding small companies, going into very, very large organizations. The first thing I wanted to touch on was this importance of being alive and making your first customer successful, because I find it hard. When you go out in the business, your 10 first customers will make or break you. And this is not about the money at this point here. The first 5, 10 customers, you're going to have to sell them differently. Because we have all sat around the water cooler with our initial team and we'll say, hey, this is just brilliant, it will sell itself. And anybody who doesn't understand how good this is shouldn't be getting our product. We've all done that one. But as you walk into an actual customer, as there's that famous saying, the best day everybody had, how's it goes? No plan has ever survived encounter with the enemy troops. Or as Mike Tyson said, everybody has a plan so they get punched in the mouth. There's some truth to that. When you come in with your plan, the customer's going to expect it's going to change your plan. So sell differently. And I think the most important thing, I believe, the most important thing of the 5 first customers is you think about how do you create reference customers. What you want is when you go sell to number 6, 7, 8, you want to be able to say, hey, Mr. Bank, Mr. Insurance Company, Mr. Car Salesman, Don't take my word for it, call those guys. Create a white paper, create a case study, and create something you can reference. That means you're going to end up spending a lot of money, a lot of investment into this. And in our case, where we're running SaaS services and slightly more expensive products, more complex products, it's not necessarily about discounting the service, but it's about putting skin in the game. Invest in your own people in the consultative engagement to allow the customer to be successful. That's a lot of time and money you're going to put into that. We'll also, I think, for those of us that tried that going into market first time, once you get the first 3 customers, you can basically throw your roadmap away. You should not throw your North Star where we want to go away, but the first 3 to 5 customers are going to define your product roadmap for the next 12 months. And that's a good thing, because they tell you all the things that you didn't think about, or while you thought you're an expert on the industry, all the things you didn't know about that particular subsegment of the industry. I would say this part here, developing the sales playbook, to me, and have started that next, that's probably the most important thing. And I'll talk about that in 2 seconds. But the last one is to be relentless to make your customer successful. I don't care if it's a $200,000 contract and you, in terms of time and resources, spend $500,000 on that. It's an investment well worth it. Don't do an internal ROI on your first 5 customers, because they determine whether you're going to be around a year from now. So as you get into new customers, these are the questions you always have to deal with. As you walk into an organization and say, I have a great solution for you, they're going to look at you and say, why do I need to do anything? Things seem to be going okay. Yeah, the industry is having a bit of a hard time, but it's always a lot easier to do nothing than to do something. After that, simple question is, why should I go with your company? If you can convince them why your solution in your company is better than other people, okay, that's the next hurdle. The last one we always get in any kind of sales, this is not startup sales, this is any type of sales, is, okay, you convinced me, I have to do something, and I have to work with you. Let's talk in 12 months. Why should I do it now? Let's just wait and see a little bit. So those are standard challenges. Now, as an early stage company, you get the benefit of adding some other challenges to that. The first one, and that one, you are going to get every single time. So where's the proof? Yeah, I really like that. They have great concept. Can you show me 1 or 2 other guys that have done that? Nobody wants to be first. The second one is going to be, so how do you implement this? And by implement it, I'm not thinking SaaS application, but how do you implement it in a business? Because many new great ideas require business transformation. So if you're going to complete it, you are propositioning that we're going to completely change the way used car sales work. Okay, how are we going to implement this? What does it mean in terms of our showrooms? What does it mean in terms of our salespeople? What does it mean in terms of our inventory? What does it mean in terms of where we are located? So implementation becomes really, really complex. And then there's the third one, and it is one of my favorites, the good old nobody got fired for buying IBM. When you walk into AT&T, you're selling to a huge organization. We talked before, when you walk into Walmart, 2 million people, you're selling to an enormous organization, but never forget, there's one person that has to sign the contract, and that one person is putting his or her name on the line. That's a make or break the career. So even if it all makes sense, figure out who are you going to make a hero, and you have to be clear on somebody in this business. You're asking somebody in this business to essentially put probably their reputation and more likely their future with the company at stake. And there are some of the challenges we have to be aware of. I've had some learnings in this as well. We spoke about this before. I spoke briefly about your positioning, how you your playbook. Thank you. So one of the things that often go wrong with companies that get the first 5 or 10 customers, they get them through hard work, but they don't develop a playbook. So one of the things that is exceptionally important is, remember, as the founder, don't start by going out and hiring a salesperson. As a founder, as a leader of an early stage company, you're the first head of sales. So you have to be the first head of sales. And what that's going to teach you is all the things we spoke about before, but it's going to allow you to build your playbook. And it's only when you have at least a draft playbook it makes sense to bring somebody into an organization and try to help you to actually sell on your behalf. Also, find a customer that's ambitious. If I'm selling a new banking product, I'm not going to go out and sell it to Bank of America or Wells necessarily, because they're already on top of the market. You want to find the underdog. Maybe you want to go to Borrow Money. Maybe you want to go to one of the challenger banks. Find both a customer, a person in the organization, and an organization that's hungry. Somebody who has something to prove, is not having the status quo. Focus on engagement, not the dollar amounts. And finally, sell to people that are not yet your friends. The tendency is I'm going to start by selling the first 5 customers are going to be my friends. And the good thing about friends is they're easier to sell to. The bad thing about friends is they're easier to sell to. They're not going to go out and say, but sorry, that's crap. That doesn't make sense to anybody. It makes sense to you and me, but that doesn't stand as its own feet. So go out, find somebody who's not your friend yet. And if you can articulate, I'm not so convinced, you can articulate the value proposition and get them to buy in, you're in a much, much better position than you were before. So that was kind of what I've chosen to talk about today. I'd love to take some questions if you have any. Please.